There is a natural order to life that we all accept without question. You bring children into this world. You hold their fragile hands when they take their first terrifying steps. You protect them from the freezing cold. You give them the absolute best pieces of the meal, even if it leaves your own stomach hollow and aching. You do this with the quiet, unspoken understanding that when your hair turns snow white and your steps grow fragile and slow, they will be there to hold your hand in return. But what happens when the very people you gave your entire world to decide that you are taking up too much space? What happens when the children you built an empire for decide it is time to dethrone the king? Today we are going to explore a betrayal that leaves no physical bruises, a heartbreak that happens behind closed, expensive doors. This is the story of Elias, a father who handed his hard-earned kingdom to his sons, only to be treated like a stray dog in his own castle. If you have a beating heart, this story is going to make it ache. But I promise you, if you stay with me until the very end, you will see exactly why you should never ever mistake an old man's silence for weakness. To understand Elias's fall, you have to understand how he built his mountain. 45 years ago, Elias was not a wealthy man. He was a man with a rusted pickup truck, calloused hands, and a pregnant wife named Martha. He started a small lumberyard on the muddy outskirts of the city, while other men slept in on Sundays. Elias was out in the freezing rain, hauling timber until his back screamed in agony. He worked through shattered fingers. He worked through fevers that would have put other men in the hospital. He did it all for two reasons: Robert and Michael, his sons. Elias made a vow to himself early on. His boys would never know the sting of poverty. They would never wear second-hand clothes, and they would never have to lay awake at night wondering how to pay the rent. And he kept that vow. As the lumberyard grew into a massive multi-million-dollar supply company, so did the boys' privileges. Elias paid for elite private schools. He bought them brand new sports cars when they turned 16. He fully funded their lavish, over-the-top weddings. Martha used to warn him. "Elias," she would say gently, pouring him coffee after a 14-hour shift, "you are giving them everything. If you never let them struggle, how will they ever learn the value of $1? How will they learn the value of you?" Elias would just smile, kiss her forehead, and tell her not to worry. "They are my blood, Martha," he would say. "A father's job is to make the road smooth." He didn't realize he was paving the road to his own destruction. The turning point came the year Elias turned 72. Martha, his compass, his partner, his reason for breathing, was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone. The grief hollowed Elias out. He became a shell of the giant he used to be. The lumberyard, which used to be his pride and joy, now just felt like a giant machine that he was too exhausted to operate. He couldn't focus. He didn't want to be the boss anymore. He just missed his wife. Sensing their father's vulnerability, Robert and Michael made their move. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when they came over to the family estate. It was a massive, beautiful 6-bedroom home that Elias had built from the ground up. They sat him down in his leather armchair. Robert poured Elias a glass of scotch and placed a warm, reassuring hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad," Robert said, his voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy, "you look exhausted. You've worked enough for 3 lifetimes. It's time for you to rest." Michael pulled a thick stack of legal documents from his designer briefcase. "We want to take the burden off your shoulders, Dad," Michael added. "Sign the business and the estate over to us. We will manage everything. You won't have to look at another spreadsheet or deal with another contractor ever again." Elias looked at the paperwork. Then he looked at his boys. He didn't see greedy men. He saw the toddlers he used to carry on his shoulders through the park. He saw the teenagers he had taught to drive. What about the house? Elias asked quietly. This was Martha's home. You'll live with us, Dad. Robert smiled warmly. You can rotate between my house and Michael's house. You will be surrounded by your grandchildren. You will be treated like a king. You will never have to worry about a single thing until the end of your days. Elias was so tired. He was so heartbroken from losing Martha. He just wanted to be taken care of. He wanted to feel like a father who had successfully raised good, honorable men. With a trembling, arthritis-ridden hand, Elias picked up the heavy gold pen. He signed the papers. He handed over his 45 years of blood, sweat, and tears. He handed over his kingdom. As Robert and Michael walked out of the house that night, clutching the signed documents, Elias thought he saw Robert smirk. But he convinced himself it was just a trick of the light. He had no idea that by signing his name, he had just signed away his humanity in the eyes of his children. The golden years he had been promised were about to become a nightmare of isolation, cruelty, and crushing neglect. When you give up the keys to your own house, you also give up the right to set the rules. Elias packed 45 years of memories, of triumph and heartbreak, into 2 small leather suitcases. He left the grand estate he had built with his own 2 hands and moved into the polished, sterile guest room of Robert's modern mansion. For the first 3 weeks, the illusion held together. Robert would ask him how he slept. Robert's wife, Karen, would pour his morning coffee. But soon, the novelty of having a live-in grandfather wore off, and the masks began to slip. It started as these things always do, with a small, seemingly innocent request. "Dad," Robert said one morning, looking up from his tablet, "Karen has hired a private Pilates instructor. She really needs the downstairs guest room for her home gym equipment. I had the movers take your things up to the room near the attic. It's cozier up there anyway." He didn't ask Elias. He simply informed him. Elias, not wanting to cause trouble, nodded quietly. "Of course, Robert. Whatever Karen needs." The attic room wasn't cozy. It was cramped. It was drafty. And the stairs were murder on Elias's arthritic knees. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional coldness that quickly followed. Karen, a woman who wore her wealth like a weapon, despised having Elias in her pristine home. She complained that he walked too loudly. She complained that he turned the television volume up too high. Soon, Elias noticed that his dinner plate was no longer being set at the main dining table. "The kids have a lot of homework, and it's just too chaotic at the main table, Dad," Karen told him with a fake, tight-lipped smile. "I set you up a nice tray in your room." And just like that, the man who used to carve the Thanksgiving turkey for 30 people was eating cold chicken alone in a drafty attic, staring at a blank wall. The first major crack in Elias's silent endurance happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Elias was walking through the living room, holding a mug of hot black tea. His hands, damaged from decades of manual labor, trembled. The mug slipped. It shattered on the expensive white Persian rug. Karen came storming out of the kitchen, her face twisted in sheer disgust. "Look at what you did," she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Do you have any idea how much that rug costs? You are constantly making a mess. You drop crumbs everywhere. It is disgusting." Elias dropped to his failing knees. "I'm sorry, Karen," he whispered, desperately trying to dab the scalding tea with his bare hands. "I'll clean it. I'm sorry." Robert walked into the room. Elias looked up at his eldest son, waiting for him to tell his wife to stop screaming at an old man. But Robert just sighed. He rubbed his temples like he was dealing with a misbehaving toddler. "Dad, just go upstairs," Robert muttered, not even looking Elias in the eye. "Just try not to be such a burden, okay? We have a lot going on." A burden. The word hit Elias like a physical blow to the chest. He slowly stood up, left the shattered pieces on the floor, and walked up the long, dark stairs. When the month ended, it was time for Elias to rotate to his younger son, Michael's house. Elias felt a faint glimmer of hope. Michael was always the softer of the two. Maybe things would be different. But Michael's wife, Jessica, didn't even bother pretending to be polite. She treated Elias like an unwanted, expired piece of furniture. She wouldn't let him sit on the leather sofas. She sprayed air freshener whenever he walked through the hallway, loudly complaining about his old man smell. Michael, buried in his phone and his stock portfolios, completely ignored the cruelty. One rainy evening in late October, the damp cold seeped into Elias's chest. He developed a severe rattling cough. His chest burned with every breath. He walked down to Michael's home office. "Michael," Elias wheezed, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "I think I have an infection. Could you drive me to the urgent care?" Michael looked up from his laptop, visibly annoyed. "Dad, are you kidding me? I have a major golf tournament with some clients early tomorrow morning," Michael snapped. "I can't be sitting in a waiting room all night. Take a taxi. You're ruining my focus." 40 minutes later, Elias sat shivering in the back of a damp taxicab. He watched the rain streak across the window, blurring the city lights. He remembered the night Michael had a fever of 104 when he was 6 years old. Elias had carried him 3 miles through a blizzard to reach the hospital because his truck wouldn't start. And now, his son couldn't spare 20 minutes to drive him to a clinic because of a golf game. In the back of that cold taxi, Elias finally realized a terrifying truth. He was a king who had given away his crown, and without his wealth, his sons had absolutely no use for him. Elias survived the infection. He sat alone in the sterile clinic waiting room for 6 hours that night, paying the bill with the last few $100s he had in his personal checking account. When he finally took a taxi back to Michael's house the next morning, nobody even asked where he had been. They didn't notice his absence, and they certainly didn't care about his return. The absolute breaking point, the moment that finally shattered the last remaining pieces of Elias's blind fatherly love, came on Thanksgiving. It was a grand, lavish affair. The dining room table was covered in crystal glasses, silver platters, and expensive bottles of wine. The wine that Elias's life's work had paid for. But Elias wasn't at the table. Jessica had told him to wait in the hallway until the main course was over. "We have important guests, Dad," she had whispered sharply. "Please just stay out of sight." So, Elias sat on a small wooden bench in the dark hallway, listening to the laughter, listening to the clinking of glasses. Then, the conversation shifted. He heard Karen's voice echoing from the dining room. "We can't keep doing this, Robert," she hissed. "I'm tired of playing nurse. It's ruining my peace of mind." "There's a state-run facility on the edge of town," Karen continued. "We can just drop him there on Monday." "The state facility?" Michael's voice chimed in. "I heard that place is terrible. They neglect the patients. The conditions are awful." "So what?" Jessica snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "He has no money left anyway. We can sell his old estate next month and finally buy that yacht. He won't even know the difference. He's basically senile." In the dark, drafty hallway, Elias closed his eyes. A single heavy tear rolled down his wrinkled cheek. But he wasn't crying because he was sad. He was crying because he had finally woken up. The grief over Martha left him. The fear of being alone left him. And in its place grew a cold, sharp, terrifying focus. They thought he was senile. They thought he was a helpless, fragile old man. They had forgotten who built the empire they were standing on. They had forgotten that Elias was a predator in the boardroom long before they were even born. The next morning, while the house was empty and the boys were at the country club, Elias walked into the study. He locked the door. He picked up the telephone, and he didn't call a taxi. He called his old lawyer, Thomas. You see, Elias might have been old, but he was a businessman first. When he sat in that leather armchair months ago, heartbroken and tired, he had signed over the lumberyard and the estate, but he had kept one very important hidden detail entirely to himself. He transferred the buildings. He transferred the business name, but he never transferred the land those buildings sat on. Elias still owned the ground beneath their feet, and the corporate lease he had quietly drafted for the business had an expiration date, which happened to be that very week. Thomas, Elias said into the phone, his voice steady and deeper than it had been in years. Execute Order 44. Sell the land to the commercial developers. Sell it all. The king was taking his crown back, and he was going to burn the castle to the ground. By the time Monday morning arrived, Elias's bags were already packed. He didn't have much. Just his clothes, a few books, and a framed photograph of Martha. He didn't call a taxi this time. He called a premium, black car chauffeur service. Before he walked out the heavy oak doors of Michael's estate, he left a crisp, white envelope dead center on the marble kitchen island. When Robert and Michael came home from their morning golf game, they found the house entirely quiet. The attic room was empty. The drafty hallways were silent. Robert saw the envelope on the island. It had his and Michael's names written on it in their father's neat, blocky handwriting. Robert tore it open. Inside was a thick legal document and a handwritten letter. Robert's hands began to shake as he read his father's words aloud. My sons, I spent 40 years breaking my back to give you the world. I gave you everything, hoping that love would be enough of a return on my investment. But I see now, I raised leeches, not men. I transferred the company name to you, but I never transferred the land. Yesterday, I sold the ground beneath your business to a commercial developer for $12 million. The new owners expect you to vacate the premises by Wednesday morning. Do not look for me. Do not call me. You wanted my wealth and you wanted me out of the way. Congratulations. You got half of your wish. I am gone, and so is the money. Good luck. Robert and Michael collapsed into the kitchen chairs. The color completely drained from Karen and Jessica's faces as they walked into the room. Without the land, the lumber business was utterly worthless. They were ruined. They had traded a massive fortune because they couldn't stand the sight of a few breadcrumbs on a rug. Miles away, Elias was sitting in the first-class cabin of an airplane. He was flying to a luxury coastal retirement community in sunny Florida, a place with ocean views, private chefs, and people who treated him with the absolute dignity he had earned. He looked out the window as the plane broke through the heavy gray clouds into the bright, golden sunlight. He took a sip of his black coffee. It was perfectly warm. And for the first time in years, it tasted absolutely delicious. Respecting your elders is not a favor. It is a fundamental duty. The people who wiped your tears and held your hand when you were helpless deserve the exact same patience and love when their time comes. If you treat the people who built you like they are a burden, do not be surprised when the very foundation crumbles beneath your feet. Because karma has a very quiet, very precise way of keeping score. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If you felt Elias's victory as much as I did, hit that like button right now. Have you ever seen someone treat their parents poorly? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Make sure you subscribe because we have another incredible story coming soon, and you will not want to miss it. Until next time, stay kind, and remember exactly who helped you get to where you are.